We don't want to be flashing. There we go. Natalie, can you hear us now? Perfect. All right. I'm so excited that we have Rebecca Gundersheim with us for a final Shabbat morning of her summer internship here at Temple. I'm exceedingly, in particular, grateful because I'm making a choice to lead the service in a mask, which is not fun, but I had a COVID exposure, and you all are just a little too close to take my mask off today. So Rebecca will get to sing full out, and we will all have a fabulous Shabbat regardless. And we'll begin in just a moment. Your prayer books are under your seats. Very close. Okay. I will share my own Shehachayani moment as we continue to get situated. As I think many folks know, I was in a minor car accident in January, and my hand is finally better enough to play guitar. And it has taken many months. So here we are. Let's do it. Hine matov u'manayim shevelachim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim shevelachim gam yachad. How good it is. I was going back to the beginning. So now I have to go and find my place. Okay, go for it. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine matov u'manayim shevelachim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim shevelachim gam yachad. All right, it is fabulous to be together. I am just so grateful to have this opportunity for Shabbat. Let's open up our prayer books, if you are with us here in the room, to page, let's see, hang on, to page 194. As we have gathered through the words of Hine Matov, we move into two blessings. A blessing first for our bodies, that they work, even when perhaps they are not working at 100%. Thank goodness that they work enough that we are able to be here together on this day. And we give a blessing for our bodies, reading together at the bottom of page 194. Praise to you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who formed the human body with skill, creating the body's many pathways and openings. It is well known before your throne of glory that if one of them be wrongly opened or closed, it would be impossible to endure and stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wondrously. Baruch atah Adonai, rofei kol basar umachli la'asot. On page 196, we have the twin prayer of the one we just offered, Elohai Neshama. So first we thank God for our bodies, and then we thank God for our souls, because you need both to be a human being, and you need both to be the person that you are. You need the outside, and then you need the thing that is uniquely you, your soul, inside. I introduced this melody last night at Shabbat services, a new melody for our congregation for Elohai Neshama. We're going to try it a little bit today and see how we do, okay? Elohai, Elohai, Neshama. Elohai, Elohai, Neshama. Shenatah Asher Koach, way to go. Trying out something new. With these words of gratitude for our soul, we continue offering additional words of gratitude, the words of Nisim B'chol Yom, of blessings for miracles we see in our lives each and every day. They begin on page 198 and will continue through three pages of chanting for all sorts of things that we are meant to recognize in our lives day after day, for the ability to wake up in the morning, for the ability to have sight, for the ability to stretch. And as we move through the Hebrew, again, if you're holding the prayer book, you'll see that the editors of this book have given you themes to latch onto in the margins. So as we chant, feel free to take time to reflect on these ideas. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'sech bivina lehafkin ben yom uven laila.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kifufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, roka haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechin mitzadei kaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten le'ifloach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hama'avir she'ena me'enai, u'tnuma me'al chapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, She'asani bat chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. She'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Oter Yisrael b'tifara. Amen.
We continue on page 224 with the words of Chatzi Kaddish, a prayer of transition, saying we've been here a little bit, we have arrived, we are ready to continue into the heart of our service.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah ve'alma divrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael v'agalo v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yiramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudashah brichu la'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran me'alema v'miru Amen.
On page 228, Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha berachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh bechol yom tamid, ma'aseh bereshit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam bechokma asita, mala haaretz kinyanecha, titbarach Adonai Eloheinu, al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, ve'al me'orei or she'asita yifarucha sela, or chadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'nizkeh kulanu mehera le'oro, Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMe'orot.
We continue with the words of Shema on page 232.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uvshokbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beineinecha uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tiskeru ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
On page 239.
Emet, there is no place where you are not, even in the wilderness there is your word. Emet, that pen strokes of lightning, white fire, black flame, stir the soul's passion, guide our sacred way. True and enduring is Torah. Your truth for us is certain and established, now and forevermore. Like Moses, Miriam, and all Israel, we sing out and rejoice. Israel, uvdekenu mechai Yehuda Israel, go'aleinu Adonai tzeva'ot shmo, Kadosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Kal Yisrael.
Please rise. Adonai,
Sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor HaMara, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, U'mevi Geula Livnei B'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo Ve'achava. Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magid, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Hakol atah Rav Le'Hoshia, Mori atah, Mechalkel Chaim
קדש את שמך בעולם, לשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, הכתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר,
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מה אדיר שמך בכל הארץ.
Baruch kevod Adonai ממקומו.
אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ורחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם,
My guess is that we're here with party.
Please be seated. We'll take time now in silent prayer and reflection with the prayers of your hearts or the prayers that are on the pages. We're going to join back together with the words of Sim Shalom on page 258.
Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, barkeinu yotzreinu kulanu ke'echad, be'or Adonai Eloheinu, Sim Shalom, Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha, Chen v'chesed v'rachamim v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, Torah chaim ve'ahat chesed, ve'ahat chesed. V'chaim v'shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim
Baruch atah Adonai, hamivarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. And that final blessing, blessed are you, Adonai, who blesses your people Israel with peace. I had a professor at HUC, our seminary, who would talk about these end blessings as an expression of sort of audacity, that we should will God to do the thing that we want. Blessed are you, God, who brings us peace, as a way of saying, please, please be our partner in this thing that we so desperately need. We turn to our Torah service. I am going to invite you to rise as we remove the Torah from the ark. And we join together in the words of Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo, Romimu Adonai Eloheinu, V'ishtachavu lechard kodsho, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, V'ishtachavu lechard kodsho, Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu, Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'ishtachavu lechar kodsho, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'ishtachavu lechar kodsho. We have just the tiniest taste of Torah today, but obviously it's always important that we get a taste of Torah on Shabbat, but in particular this week because we are preparing to finish the book of Numbers. And we want to acknowledge that important transition in the cycle of the summer. There we go. So I'll say a little bit more about what we're doing post-reading, just a taste of this first of a double portion, Matot. Rebecca, for your last weekend, would you lead us in the Aliyah?
Absolutely. Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Vayidaber Moshe el Rashi Hamatot Livnei Yisrael lemor Zeh hadavar asher tzivah Adonai Ish ki yidor neder l'Adonai O Yishava Shiv'ah Lasor Isar al nafsho lo yachel devaro ki chol hayotze mipiv yaaseh ve'isha ki tidor neder ladonai ve'asera isar Beveit aviha bin ureha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Thank you. And here, if you can see ever so slightly this giant gap, which means we are at the end of the book of Numbers, and we chant together for finishing a book the words chazak, chazak, benit chazek, which means may you be strong, like extra strong, bonus strong, and be strengthened. Chazak, chazak, benit chazek. Let's try it. Chazak, chazak, benit chazek. So I mentioned this is a double Torah portion, okay? Does anybody know anything about why we might have single or double Torah portions? Anyone? No? All right. So, yes? That's a fabulous idea, fine sir, that perhaps it might have to do with the fact that there are two people chanting from the Torah, which Jackson knows very well is typical for us here at Temple Bethel, that we might have two kids reading from the Torah in honor of their bar bat mitzvah on the same Shabbat. That is a great idea. Alas, it is not correct, but it was very good. Try. This is the hardest belt, so we're going to see if I can still talk and do the thing at the same time. So the Torah is divided into 54 sections. All right, there are 54 Torah portions. I got it. And in the Hebrew calendar, we have a leap year or a not leap year, just like we do in our American Gregorian calendar. You know, sometimes February gets an extra day. In the Hebrew calendar, however, you don't get an extra day. If it's a leap year, you get an entire extra month. Okay, so that means that there are some years that have 4 more, maybe even more than that, maybe 5, extra Shabbatot to read Torah portions. But then there are years that don't have all of those extra weeks. So in a year that is not a leap year, which is right now, some of the Torah portions get doubled up to ensure that you read the entire Torah every single year. There we go. This is our tremendously beautiful Torah that is difficult to dress because of how beautiful the crowns are. So we have 2 Torah portions this week because we are not in a leap year. They are Matot and Maseh. And as I mentioned, this is the conclusion of the book of Numbers. We have all done it. We have all bared witness to the end of a book of Torah this week. And one of the things that I find interesting about this is that the very beginning of this double portion and the very end of the double portion, the end of the book of Numbers, sort of touch on women and something of particular interest to women's issues. So the very first bit that I read was just a preamble into this section that talks about making a vow or a promise. And there's a lot that is interesting about what it means to make a vow or a promise according to the Torah and Jewish tradition. But to draw the thread of women out, it explains that if a man makes a vow and he intends to make a vow, right? Like his heart is in it, if that makes sense, which is just fascinating. That tradition sort of specifies like the vow is valid if you mean it, like if you really actually mean it. That a man's vow is binding, and that a woman's vow, if a woman is married or too young to be married, like has never been married or is presently married to a person, that her vow can be nullified by that man that she is in relationship with, either her father or her husband. But a woman who is either a widow whose husband has died or who is divorced, there's no one who can cancel out any of her promises. Now, this is very, very problematic to us as modern people. We're like, how can that be? How can you say that, if Johanna makes a vow that her dad can just be like, you don't get to keep that promise. That's not right or fair. And that's one of the spots in Torah where we have to push ourselves to think far more creatively about how we understand some of these rules that are ancient and were perhaps appropriate in that moment in time. And to just draw the connection to the end of what happens in the very last sentences in the double portion. In last week's Torah portion, which is called Pinchas, you have this fascinating episode where there is a man named Tzlofchad who dies, and he leaves no sons. So he had 0 sons. He happened to have 5 daughters. And the inheritance practices, as described in the Torah, would mean that Tzlofchad's land had no one to inherit it, because land could only be inherited by sons. So there's this entire episode where the daughters of Tzlofchad passionately bring their case and say, how is this fair? That my father had no sons and therefore his land is lost to his family line. And in last week's Torah portion, they are awarded his land, which is unprecedentedly awesome in the Torah. And yet here we are a week later, and we have another example of women can't make their own vow if they're married or if they're at home living with their father. And at the very end of Maseh, the very last words of the book of Numbers, the issue is raised. What happens if the daughters of Tzlofchad, so here we are, it's like, imagine it wasn't a leap year, it's 3 weeks later, and we're back to talking about these 5 ladies from over here. What happens if they marry someone who isn't a part of their tribe? What happens if somebody comes in and tries to swipe the land that was supposed to be a part of this particular family through marriage? And what is decided in the very last words of the book of Numbers is that it should be that the 5 women marry inside of their tribe, inside of the larger scope of their family and tribe, so to ensure that their land stays with them. Which is just fascinating to me, that you get essentially a court ruling, right, that says, you guys, you have this, it is for you. And then just a little bit of time has passed later, there's a need to create an additional protection around that decision. It's not just that it is not assumed in the social dynamics that were in place at the time that the Torah was written, that everyone would adhere to the decision that was made. So they sort of build a fence around the concept of these 5 women owning their land to ensure that, to further protect it. Any thoughts as you hear this fascinating window into ancient Israelite history that we hear in this week's Torah portion? Okay. Any thoughts?
Well, personally, I just think it is interesting, as you were talking about, that some ancient rules and traditions are very, very important to adhere to, and some were built in order to be changed and altered and an extra fence around, like you said, as the world changes and as time goes by. And I just think that's really interesting.
So all of that is by which to say we have some just fascinating little glimpses into the dynamics between men and women at this moment in history, and a continued reminder that we have to stretch our brains and our understanding to find meaning in the words of Torah. So as I want to leave you with the charge that perhaps as you reflect on how you chose to spend this beautiful morning with us, that you think about what the lesson you personally derive from this issue of women and inheriting and being able to make promises for themselves or not, how you would understand that, like how you would stretch yourself to find meaning in this particular Shabbat. Before we put the Torah back in the ark, we offer the words of Mishaberach L'Cholim, our prayer for healing, whether that be of body, of mind, or of spirit. It is a prayer that we say with the hopes that those we love, those we care about, are granted a greater sense of wholeness, a greater sense of peace and well-being. The words are on page 371. We join together. Rise to return the Torah to the ark, and we'll continue with the words of Aleinu L'Shabeach on page 586. Aleinu L'Shabeach La'adon HaKol La'teitidu La'liotzer Bereshit Shelo Asanu Kegoyei Ha'aratzot Velo Samanu K'mishpechot Ha'adama Shelo Sam Chelkeinu Kahem V'gor Aleinu K'chol Hamanan Va'anachnu kore'im u'mishtachvim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamalachim hakadosh baruch hu v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz vayom hahu Please be seated. The words of Mourner's Kaddish are on page 598. Our congregation remembers during the period of Shloshim, the first 30 days after their death, Herbert Corday, Sam Foster, Harriet Hirschman, Varda Kaufman, Ellen Kelso, Sally B. Kohlenberg, and B. Melvin Swire. And at their yahrzeit, the anniversary of their death, we remember William Herbert Billy Aschendorf, William C. Batt, Jules Buxbaum, John Canfield, Gloria Coleman, Leon Dobbs, Marion Dobkin, Randy Fagan, Arthur Finken, Helen Glazer Finman, Harry Fox, William Friedman, Debbie Lynn Freiberg,
Margaret Gentile, Nancy Gilberg, Ann Gerson Shore, Rose Gluckman, Jean Goldberg, Molly Haber, Pat Hayes, Leonard Hecht, Gersona Hyman, Ida Henschel, Yetta Peller-Hurd, Johanna Hilfman, Martin Herlick, Larry Kaplan, Zev Carmone, Sadie Klotzman, Marie Kritzer, Harry Leventhal, Ida Levine, Shirley Levine, Edward Minogue, Jack Miller, George Irving Miller, Clara Newman, Ida Poehler, Sam Poehler, Bernard Price, Elaine Santer Redlick, Mortimer Reich, Marion Sager, Albert Shear, Margaret Butler Sealbinder, Sylvia Slip, Bessie Stein, Lawrence Stickler, and Maurice Weinstein. Are there any other names anyone wants to share for Kaddish today? We rise together as a congregational family for the words of Mourner's Kaddish.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, Belma divrach birute v'yamlit malchute, B'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shema rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudasha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru. Amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat
Thank you for being here.